Hi everyone! Chess is a complex game and we have all wished for it to be a bit more simple at times. Well, today I have brought a godsend for us all. Not that I'm a prophet or anything, of course, but that this game was just so brilliant yet so simple at the same time. Our protagonist in this game is the Indian superstar Pragg Babu. You may remember from one of our previous videos in which he was getting cooked, but now he's the one cooking with his chef hat on. And who is he cooking, you may wonder? It is the world champion himself. So it seems that we have a very interesting spectacle ahead of us. So without further ado, let's get into it. Pragg had white pieces and decided to open the game with the move pawn to d5. So if you're a more or less solid player, then this is definitely the move for you. Knight to f6 by Gukesh, c4, e6, knight c3, and now the move bishop to b4 is played by Gukesh. This is known as the Nimzo-Indian defense. Black does not put any pawns in the center as of yet, which is opposing what we are taught as beginners. We should take space in the center with our pawns and put our pawns in the center. But there's also a very, very good reason why Black is refraining from doing this thing, and that is for flexibility, essentially. So there are many pawn structures, okay, there are many setups which Black can take. They can set up with b6, they can set up with c5, they can set up with d5, they can set up with d6, or a mix of these structures. Which means that White does not really know what he's up against, and that is exactly the advantage that Black has in this opening. So e3 is played by Pragg, essentially just deciding to develop the bishop and the knight before sort of doing anything against the bishop on b4, short castles, bishop to d3, d5, and now the move pawn to a3. So this is a very tricky move. Are you going to take the knight and give me the bishop here, whilst also, of course, weakening my pawn structure, or are you going to back up and lose time with your bishop? So Gukesh first tries to insert this pawn exchange, pawn takes on c4, bishop takes on c4, and now he decides to back up. Well, knight to f3 was played by Pragg, pawn to c5, now immediately striking back at the center. Very, very instructive. You should always try to look for such pawn breaks, especially when you have given up your pawn on the center for a flank pawn. Short castles by Pragg, a6, and now of course this move is simple. It's just trying to go b5, and as Pragg sees it, simply chops down and stops the play. Queen takes d1, rook takes d1, and bishop takes c5. So if you take a good look at this position, the pawn structure is totally identical and symmetrical, and the piece distribution is almost entirely symmetrical as well. But there are two key differences, which would mean that only Black can, only White, rather, can play for a win. These knights, oh my god, these knights, look at that, right? The knights for White, oh my god, I'm so good with these pawns, man, with these pawns. The knight for White is stronger than the knight for Black, and the rook for White is better than the rook for Black. These two mean that only White can play for a win. I really don't know why Gukesh chose this position, but well, that's what he did. Well, so Pragg gets the position he wants. He has to go to work. He has to go cooking. Bishop to e2. So this is a bit of a difficult move to explain. It's a bit complex. But the first thing we have to understand is that this bishop on c4 is not at all well placed. It's hitting at two rocks, well-defended pawns, and it is not where it's supposed to be. After bishop to e2, we just free up the c4 square for a piece which will use it and would like it to more, namely this knight on f3. So when the knight just essentially just goes here, it's going to enjoy a lot of activity and access to very, very juicy squares. And after the knight goes to c4, well then our bishop can go over here. So we're essentially swapping the pieces, the position of the pieces, and we are activating both of them and improving both of them at the same time. So knight to c6 is played by Gukesh, and now b4, freeing up the b2 square for the bishop while gaining a tempo on the opponent's bishop. And here Gukesh, for whatever reason, he decided to back up with the bishop to a7. So by far the most natural move is to go here, but of course Gukesh tries to keep here. It's a very, very bad bishop, even though it seems good, but it's hitting at this rock. Now bishop to b2 is played. Now rook d8 by Gukesh. So it seems like Gukesh is equalizing this game, is heading for a draw. But if it was a draw, if it was a dry draw, I wouldn't talk about it, right? Well, it is here that we have a cold shower for Gukesh, the move knight to e5. So this is not like a game-ending move, but it's a very, very strong one. You cannot take the knight ever because of your back rank problems, which stem from your development problems. Now, I'm just essentially just threatening to take your knight and weaken your pawn structure. So Gukesh plays the move bishop to d7, defending everything. Now my knight is actually hanging. So Gukesh does, Pragg rather, decides to take his time and to cash in, take the bishop. Well, on the surface, you may say that this is a stupid decision by Pragg, and I know chess better than he does, and he shouldn't be a grandmaster, strip his title. And you may say that this bishop is rubbish, and this knight is amazing. Why should we trade them? Well, the reason is that some advantages are long-term. This knight is very, very active in the short term, but in the long term, the two bishops are going to be deciding who's better, okay? So when we take this bishop, I'm now going to have these two bishops for myself. I'm going to have these two bishops for myself, and these two bishops are going to go crisscross applesauce. They're going to go brrr, and they're going to enjoy a lot of activity because the position is very open. Inversely, if the position was closed, then we would try to keep our knights. Well, knight takes on d7 and now knight e4. So we're eyeing some juicy squares, c5 and d6. Then knight goes to b6, covering knight d6. However, we can easily just go to c5. Simple, right? The bishop has lost contact with there. We go knight c5, and this pawn is very, very weak, and the Achilles heel essentially of the black position. The rook goes to b8, defending, and now it is a very, very good time to take the rook. The knight takes back, and also if the rook takes, it's not about the move knight takes b7. This does not win you the game, but because black has this very, very nice move, rook to, not d3 of course, but to d2, sliding over. And the only reason we are not losing here is that because we have the very vital counterattack, bishop to f3. And essentially just swapping this bishop for this knight. But then after all of this, black will play knight to c4 and go very active. We have won a pawn, of course, but our opponent has gone out of the cage and they are like causing a lot of problem. So we should try to avoid doing that. A very nice lesson whenever you are sort of in such a position where you have your opponent on the strings, do not send them out of that even if it wins you a pawn. After the move rook takes d8, the correct move is to reverse engineer the process with the move bishop to f3. And now if the rook tries to go back to defend, well, I have this move knight takes b7 and winning a pawn technically in the process. So knight takes d8 was played by Gukesh, and now bishop b5, hitting the rook. The rook only has one square because if it goes to c8, I will take one here, and after knight takes, I will go bishop takes a7, a6 rather. And I'm going to pick up this knight because there is no way you can defend it. Your pieces are just so clumsy. And I'm going to be up by 2 pawns and I'm simply going to win the game. So, rook a8. And now, well, it may seem like you do not really have much improving moves left. You're going to just develop this rook and then it's going to peter out for a draw, right? Well, how can I win this game? Well, this is where many people, I mean, including myself, I cannot exclude myself. I also struggle at many times. And such moves at such positions by top-level players is exactly what you have to study. Pawn to e4, very, very classy. Stopping knight to d5. That was the main source of counterplay for black to look to chop off this knight and weaken the pawn structure. So, here, black plays bishop to b8. Essentially, when you do not have the bishop pair, your opponent does, try to swap one of the pairs. Gukesh is very principled and knows that, and the inverse of this rule is that whenever you have the bishop here, do not trade it, unless you have a very good reason to do so. Pragg avoids the trade, bishop to d4, and now this may seem like a retreat, but it is a threat of knight takes on b7, picking up this knight, and then knight just drops back. You may think that Gukesh is essentially just setting up the pieces for a freestyle game like this, but this is not a freestyle game, this is a classical game with a classical time format. Rook to d1 is played by Pragg. I'm now threatening bishop takes g7. Take notice that every single improving move is coming with a threat. That's why Gukesh will never have time to activate his pieces and to get back into the game. So, to deal with the threat on the d file, bishop to d6 was played. But now we have again a free pass to the very same square on e5 with the bishop this time. The bishop is immune because of the back rank problems, which again stem from your passivity. So you have to drop back with your bishop while still maintaining contact with this knight. Now my bishop goes to c7, so I just zigzag my way through and activate again with threats. I'm again threatening to take the knight and checkmate you, so the knight just finally goes off and chucks this pawn at b7. You notice when Pragg wins the pawn, there's absolutely nothing that Gukesh can simply do to gain counterplay. So here he just simply plays g5. You really don't have any other moves, much other moves. Also, you're never going to get back rank checkmate. Now a nice move by Pragg again, bishop to f1. So this bishop has been on a very spiritual journey. Once it made a very deep move to e2, and then it wasn't used at all and went back to f1. Well, the reason why the bishop goes back to f1 is very deep, and essentially is that this knight is going to be a target. This bishop is going to be a target on e2. The next move, which essentially what it wants to play, is the move rook to c1, the move which makes inroads to the black position. But if you play it right now, then black is going to play knight to d4. When you drop back this time, they can play knight b5. And they sort of just say, okay, either the pawn or the bishop. And they're sort of getting that counterplay which you want. So bishop to f1 is played, making sure that you just safeguard everything before going on attacks. So now g4 is played by Gukesh. Not much else you can really do. Now rook c. And the key difference that this move bishop f1 makes is shown clear after the move knight to d4, where we play pawn to a4, stopping the move knight to b5. You may think that this pawn is hanging, but of course it's not. Rook to c4, we win a piece, and we're going to win the game. So, after the move a4, the pawn went to f6 for Gukesh. Now e5, we just strike back exactly the pawn they pushed, and then they're going to play knight a7. So this is a very, very Gukesh move. Everything seems to be against black, but they're finding those very, very dim sources of light in their position and try to take advantage. Now, they sort of can take on b4, right? Because then I'm going to have rook c4, and after rook c4, I'm just going to defend with the move knight a to c6, and everything is protected. A miracle, really. So, just simply defend the threat. Don't make it complicated. Bishop to d6. I like this move, really, because it stops all counterplay. Knight to c6 is played by Gukesh, b5 takes, and now, again, an intermezzo. Pragg, oh my god, Gukesh inserted the move bishop takes d6. Intermezzo is a very catchy and a very fancy phrase for essentially just inserting a move in between a sequence. Essentially, if this knight moves now, well then this bishop will be hanging. So we first take this bishop, and after pawn takes, we move our knight away. So we've got these two passed pawns. Let's see what we can do with it. So here, Pragg plays a move rook d1, getting his rook behind the passed pawn, which is very, very advised. And essentially, the pawn is going to go beep beep, I'm going to queen, baby. Well, rook to b8 is played by Gukesh. And if you say, well, let's trade pieces, I'm up material. No, that's wrong. Rook takes and rook takes b7. The thing about grandmasters is that you have to beat them many times in the game. Even if you're in such an amazing position, they will always find ways to give you some rope, give you some possibility of just throwing yourself in the mud. And here both of these pawns are sort of just blockaded, and also the king is going to enter the action as well. This is still winning, but it's just very difficult. But the classy move again from Pragg is the move knight to c5, dropping back. And now this knight is actually hanging. And just Gukesh simply resigned in this position. And well, the reason for that is that, let's say that you just take on b5. Now I'm going to take on, I'm going to play d7, force your knight to the c6 square, and now I'm going to take on e6. some threatening the queen. And another thing you have to take notice of is that this rook is overloaded. It's defending d8 and also the knight on b5. So we're going to be winning material at the end of everything. Thanks for watching this far. I hope you enjoyed it, and in case you did, this is also a very interesting video to watch. Unlike this game, which was very quiet, this was an absolute roller coaster ride, and everything was all over the place. See you in the next video. Take care.